There is a moment in your wife's life that may have already begun, even if you haven't noticed it. It comes like an imperceptible whisper, like a chill slipping through a crack in the middle of the night. Everything looks the same, but something has changed. You notice it in the tiniest details. A gaze that lingers too long elsewhere, a distracted gesture when you speak, the sense that her mind is somewhere else. It isn't disinterest, it isn't simple fatigue, it's something else. It's as if a flame has been lit inside her, one that she doesn't yet know if it will illuminate or burn. It's not that she suddenly stops loving you, nor that she rejects the past you shared. It's about a question that begins to torment her in silence. Is this all? That question, never spoken aloud, turns into a constant echo. Every forced laugh at a social gathering, every walk down familiar hallways, every conversation that sounds like a scratched record feeds that echo. And suddenly, what once felt like home becomes a kind of worn-out stage where every act repeats with such precision that it no longer produces any emotion. The unsettling part is that this emptiness isn't immediately filled by anyone else, but it doesn't stay silent either. It begins to seek small cracks through which to escape. She becomes more attentive to what others notice in her, even if she pretends not to care. She surprises herself by valuing fleeting glances, innocent comments, even trivial details that make her feel seen in a way she hasn't experienced for years. And it's not because she hates you, nor because she wants to destroy the family. It's because there is a murmur inside her pushing her toward the unknown, as if she needs to prove she still exists outside the script she's been performing for so long. You notice it in her routines, even if you'd rather deny it. That sudden interest in changing her appearance, that extra attention to things she once ignored, the way she checks her reflection, as if searching for someone she no longer recognizes. It's not superficial vanity. It's the urgency to confirm that she hasn't disappeared behind the years, that she's still someone beyond being the wife, the mother, the role life imposed on her. That urgency is dangerous because once it's activated, there's no turning back. It starts as a game, an innocent curiosity, but it turns into a need, and need never rests. Imagine it like a crack in the ice. At first it seems like nothing, just a fine line that doesn't threaten the surface. But if you get closer and listen, you'll hear it creak, feel the tension building beneath the calm. Sooner or later, the crack opens and the ice breaks. That's what happens with her. What seems like simple domestic boredom is in reality the internal pressure of someone who has reached a point in her life where she needs to prove she hasn't lost her power, that she can still awaken emotions, that she isn't invisible. Here lies the mystery. She doesn't admit it, not even to herself. She may cover it up with smiles, routine phrases, a busy schedule. But underneath beats a growing restlessness. And each day that passes, that restlessness pushes her a little farther away from you, even if she's still in the same room. You think she's still the same, but inside she's exploring paths you don't know. And if you don't discover it in time, one day you'll feel like you're living with a stranger. The brutal truth is that this isn't an accident. It's a process that arrives with age, with maturity, with the awareness that time doesn't wait. It's the moment when she begins to ask if everything she built is worth enough to sacrifice what remains. And when that question enters the game, the answers she finds can shatter any certainty you hold. What today looks like simple silence may tomorrow become a decision that strikes you like lightning in the middle of a clear sky. Do you see? It isn't boredom, it isn't a whim, it isn't a phase that will pass. It's a force pulling her along, and if you don't understand it, it will end up pulling you too. And here is where the wound deepens, because what no one tells you about these inner explosions is that they're not only about emotions, but also about the perception of time. At that cursed age, when the mirror begins to reflect truths that once could be ignored, an invisible countdown appears. She begins to hear a clock that isn't on the wall, but inside her own mind. Every second reminds her that the future is no longer infinite, that what's left to live is much less than what has already been lived. And that discovery is a silent earthquake. Think about what that means. For years, she believed there was time, that the decisions made could be corrected later, that present sacrifices would bring future rewards. But now, in middle age, that later becomes a ghost that no longer exists. And when she looks back, she finds a life full of duties fulfilled but desires postponed. And that difference between what she dreamed and what she actually lived opens like an abyss. In that abyss lies everything: nostalgia, anger, guilt, and also a brutal urgency to recover what was lost. That's why, at that moment, everyday objects begin to weigh like chains. The dining table stops being a place of union and becomes a symbol of routine. The bed, once a stage of passion, now feels like a space of distance. Even the children, who once justified every renunciation, become living proof of everything she gave up to sustain the family. That look that once reflected pride can now become the mirror of a sacrifice that devoured entire parts of her identity. And here comes the most dangerous part. She begins to feel she hasn't lived enough. That idea corrodes her because it doesn't refer to postponed trips or forgotten career goals. It refers to life experiences, intense emotions, the feeling of truly being alive. And then any spark, no matter how small, can ignite a fire. An unexpected conversation, a trivial proposal, even a memory that suddenly resurfaces. Anything can trigger that need to experience what she never allowed herself. Not because she hates what she has, but because she fears that what remains won't be enough to feel what she needs. And do you know what's most unsettling? This urgency doesn't present itself as a frontal attack, but as a constant whisper. She can keep doing everything: smile in family photos, cook, work, manage the schedule. And yet, inside herself, she is increasingly convinced her life has been too predictable. That predictability is pure poison, because it makes any promise of novelty, of intensity, become an irresistible temptation. It isn't merely a matter of infidelity. It's a matter of psychological survival. And meanwhile, you might rest easy thinking everything is the same. But no, it's not the same. She has entered a state where she needs to feel she can still choose, that she's not a prisoner of decisions made 20 years ago. And that need makes her unpredictable. She may decide to reinvent herself radically. She may abandon things that once seemed untouchable. She may destroy routines that gave you security. She doesn't do it out of cruelty or selfishness, but because inside she's convinced that if she doesn't do it now, she'll never have the chance. Here is where romantic love is stripped bare. Because that myth that marriage is an eternal refuge collides with biological and existential reality. What once seemed like a tale of two souls destined to accompany each other was, in truth, a contract disguised as passion. And when she realizes this, the mask falls and you're left facing an uncomfortable truth. What once united you is no longer what can keep you together. That's the lie that breaks, and the sound of its collapse is deafening. And there's something even crueler that almost no one acknowledges. Society as a whole is designed to silence this explosion. No one wants to talk about it because it dismantles the foundations of the ideal family, because it forces us to accept that marriage isn't a guarantee, but a gamble that almost always loses. That's why they call it a midlife crisis, to reduce it to a pathetic label, to pretend it's a whim, when in reality it's the eruption of truth. The woman who goes through that age isn't delirious. She's seeing what she never dared to face. And that gaze is deadly for the illusion of eternal love, because she begins to suspect it doesn't exist, that what existed was need, instinct, biology disguised as poetry. And when the disguise breaks, the void left behind is unbearable. How to fill it? With intensity, with risk, with the validation she never asked for before, and now needs as if her life depended on it. And you, if you don't understand it, if you stay on the surface, will be the last to realize the ground beneath your feet no longer exists. The fascinating, and at the same time terrifying thing, is that this process doesn't stop. It's like a clock without pause. Every day that passes, the tension increases. You can ignore it. You can pretend everything is fine. But the day will come when the bomb explodes. And when it does, you'll discover that the love you defended as your greatest certainty was, in fact, the greatest lie. And the most disconcerting thing of all is that when this bomb begins to pulse beneath the surface, it doesn't do so noisily or obviously, but in small gestures that seem harmless. The way she walks changes. The way she answers simple questions shifts. Even the brightness in her eyes when a stranger listens to her with interest. You think they're minor details, but in reality they are the first tremors of an earthquake. Because the mind, when it feels unsatisfied, doesn't scream. It whispers. And those whispers are what make the difference between a marriage that survives and one that disintegrates in silence. The question is inevitable. Why does it happen right at that point in life? Because until then, inertia and responsibilities acted like invisible chains. There were young children, there were debts, there was a routine too heavy to stop and think about oneself. But as time goes on, and those responsibilities shift, a new space appears. And that space isn't peace, it's noise. It's the awareness that life is slipping away, and what isn't experienced now will be lost forever. That awareness cuts like a knife and breaks the illusion of stability you defended so hard. And then another phenomenon arises that no one wants to accept: comparison. She begins to compare herself with other lives, with other women, with other possibilities. She looks at those who dared to break everything, and though she says she doesn't understand them, inside she feels envy. She looks at those who live with intensity, and though she criticizes their chaos, she secretly craves that dose of unpredictability. Those comparisons are poison because they remind her that maybe she settled too soon, that maybe she mortgaged her freedom in the name of a love that wasn't love, but strategy. And each comparison distances her further from the version of herself you know. At that point, the everyday becomes a prison. Every repeated family dinner, every automatic gesture, every conversation about the same old topics becomes shackles she begins to hate. She doesn't hate the people. She hates the feeling of being trapped in an eternal cycle. And here's the brutal part. The more the routine tries to hold her, the stronger the urge to escape. It's an instinct of psychological survival, a mute scream demanding change. And if she doesn't find that change within the relationship, she'll seek it outside. Not because she wants to destroy everything, but because she feels that if she doesn't, she'll destroy herself. And here comes another subject many prefer not to touch: the role of invisibility. Because there comes a time when a woman begins to feel invisible in her own home. Invisible in decisions, invisible in emotions, invisible in desire. And that invisibility is unbearable. It's not about caresses, compliments, or kind gestures. It's about being recognized as someone alive, with dreams, with desires, with the capacity to make an impact in the world. When she doesn't feel that, she seeks any trace of attention that reminds her she still exists. And that trace, when it appears, becomes a magnet that can pull her into places she never imagined she'd go. The most disturbing part is that she herself is surprised by her reactions. She may ask, "Why do I care so much about the opinion of that stranger? Why do I feel a thrill at receiving a comment that once wouldn't have mattered at all?" And in that questioning, she realizes something terrible. That she has been dead inside for too long, that her identity has been absorbed by roles that no longer belong to her. That revelation is as painful as it is liberating. Painful because it reveals all that was lost, liberating because it opens the door to what can still be regained. But be careful. This process isn't smooth or reasonable. It's chaotic, contradictory, devastating. Because within the same body coexist two voices locked in relentless battle. One says, "Stay, protect what you have, don't risk stability." And the other screams, "Escape, reinvent yourself, don't endure one more day of emptiness." That inner war reflects itself in every gesture, in every silence, in every postponed decision. And meanwhile, you're left wondering what the hell is happening? The brutal answer: life is happening, and she is deciding whether to remain prisoner of a contract she no longer recognizes, or risk everything to feel alive again. The unsettling part is that this process doesn't stop even if you try to ignore it, because it doesn't depend on you. It depends on her. It depends on the way her mind processes the passage of time. It depends on the questions she asks herself when no one is listening. It depends on the brutal clarity with which she begins to see that romantic love was nothing more than a disguise for biology. And when that clarity arrives, there's no going back. You can deny it, you can mask it, you can distract it, but sooner or later the truth strikes. And when it strikes, the marriage trembles. Here, at this exact point, is where the outcome is decided. Because some men never see the storm coming until it's too late. Others, however, manage to decipher the signs and understand that the only way out is to stop sustaining the illusion and begin building something real. Something that doesn't depend on empty promises, or inherited roles, or stories that only served to numb awareness. Something born from naked truth, from the acceptance that eternal love never existed, but that there can still be another kind of connection, more honest, more raw, more human. And then the final question is inevitable. What will you do when that truth appears in your own home? Look her in the eyes and pretend everything is the same, or dare to face the collapse to see if, among the ruins, something new can still be born. Because if you don't, be prepared. One day you'll wake up next to your wife and discover she's no longer there, even if she's in the same bed. And now, listen carefully, because here comes what no one dares to tell you out loud. The end of this story isn't written, but it does have diverging paths. One is denial, pretending nothing is happening, covering the crack with rehearsed smiles, filling the calendar with activities, and hoping the storm will pass on its own. That path is comfortable, yes, but it leads to slow destruction, to irreversible emotional distance, to shared loneliness between two people who look at each other without recognizing one another. And now that we've made it this far, before we continue, I want to present the following to you. Our book, The Formula of Awakening, is now available. Do you feel like there's something inside you that wants to awaken, but you don't know where to start? Then I invite you to transform your way of thinking, and with it, your way of living. Discover who you can become. Start today. The link to get the ebook is in the first pinned comment of this video. Grab your copy now at a great price, With that said, let's continue with the video. The other path is brutal courage, to face what is happening head-on, to accept that the romantic love you swore was a construction, and that now you can only survive if you're capable of inventing a new way of being together. That path is hard. It strips you bare. It forces you to hear what you never wanted to hear. But it's the only path where something real can be born. Because in the end, it all comes down to a choice. Do you prefer the safety of a lie that slowly consumes you both, or the vertigo of a truth that can set you free? That is the great question your wife is asking herself right now, even if she doesn't say it. And the question is, will you dare to answer it with her? Or will you leave her alone in that battle? Understand this. The midlife crisis in women is not an anecdote. It's the moment when the veil of illusions falls and everything you've built is exposed. What you do in that instant will determine whether what you have dies in silence or is reborn in an entirely different form. If you're capable of looking at her as if seeing her for the first time, if you can accompany her in her search without fear of losing yourself, then maybe there's hope. If not, then accept it. Biology, time, and truth always end up winning. And here's what I want you to burn into your mind. I'm not telling you to save your marriage. I'm telling you to save your consciousness. Don't keep living blindfolded. Don't ignore the signs. Don't allow the collapse to take you by surprise as if it were lightning out of a clear sky. If you understand the trap, you can decide how to play the game. If not, you'll simply be another piece dragged along by a destiny you never chose. So if you've made it this far, I want to propose something. Subscribe to this channel, because what we talked about today is only the first layer of a much deeper topic we'll keep exploring together. And in the comments, I want you to write a simple but powerful phrase: "The truth hurts, but it sets you free." I want to read it and know how many of you have had the courage to look into the darkness without turning away. Now, yes, it's time to say goodbye, but not the way you expect. I won't give you a kind closure or a cheap motivational message. I'll leave you with this image. Imagine that tomorrow you wake up, look at your wife, and instead of recognizing the woman you've always known, you see in her eyes a stranger who has been waiting for years to come out. That stranger isn't new. She was always there, but you didn't see her. The question is, will you dare to meet her now, or will you let her leave forever? Until the next video, if you still have the courage to face what's coming,